City of Stevens Point Public Works Committee meeting, recorded November 14, 2022.
We'll call the Board of Public Works to order. Trish, can you call the roll, please?
Sure, Mayor Wiesa.
Here.
And I'm sorry, how do you say your last name?
Plaisance.
David Plaisance.
Here.
Fred is dismissed, or excused, I'm sorry.
Dismissed.
Everyone tell them.
He's out.
Mary Kneebone.
Here.
Sean Morrow.
Here.
Ginger Keemer.
Here.
And Dean Shuda.
Here.
All right, the first item on the agenda is an alternative funding presentation for the possibility of a transportation utility. We're not looking for action on this, but your staff has been working very diligently. When Mary has a question about how do you balance a budget, first of all, you got to know what the budget is, but regardless, no, we're working on creative ways for us to keep providing the services that we do while still working within the laws that we're restricted by the state. So one of those is the possibility of creating a transportation utility. Utilities are generally enterprise funds outside the levy limits, and a transportation utility is allowed by law. So we're going to have a presentation talking about what it could mean. And Director Badun and Director Lemke have been working pretty diligently on the PowerPoint. I haven't even seen it yet, so this is all new to me too. Well, the slides are, I guess. So who wants to start? Joel, do you want to go up to the lectern? Scott will do it from here.
Do it from here, yes.
And Scott, since you are the public utility person, why don't you, or public works person, why don't you start there, and then we'll move into transportation with Joel.
Absolutely. Just really to introduce this is a very high level look at it. I just have a few slides, less than 10, trying to keep this short and sweet, just to introduce this, and then just kind of see where we are, otherwise might go from here. So we may not have all the answers to, of course, all the questions, since this is just that high level look. But we're kind of working our way towards something that we can, potentially, if desired, to present at a later date with much more of the specifics. And with that, though, I'll turn it over to Joel, who will kind of tell you about where we've been in the past and why this might make some sense.
Yeah, so just wanted to talk real quick. There's just two slides here on this, on utilities in general, right? So in the utilities department, the enterprises, we have water, wastewater, stormwater. Those are kind of the water utilities, transit, airport, and fiber. So there's 6 enterprises there. So this isn't anything new to us. We do this, and we've got 6 of them running. I think there's actually more. I think the parking thing actually runs as an enterprise inside the city levy. I don't know, but those are the ones that we're probably all most familiar with. I wanted to put these up there just so you have a sense of the fact that we've done this, and in pretty recent history. In 2008, that was the year when we transitioned all of the all of the infrastructure of the wastewater system that's outside the fence of the treatment plant to the utilities. So that used to be part of the tax-funded part of the operation, part of Public Works. We transferred those assets and those responsibilities, some staff and equipment, to the existing wastewater utility, and that generated the need there in revenue to run all that was about $907,000 extra on top of what they had already been collecting per year at that time. In 2013, now not talking about another water utility, the stormwater utility, but this is a new one. We took another set of assets that were previously paid for through tax revenue and put them on a fee-based system, and that right off the bat was about a $1.1 million need for revenue. So those are just to kind of say we've been here before. If you guys want to look at this as an opportunity, we have experience with it, and it's been done twice in the last 14 years. And then just to kind of talk about how it works, it's going to be most similar to the stormwater utility. And so if everybody understands how the whole ERU thing works, every single family household in the city and the stormwater utility pays the same amount, right? And then after that, there's a measured component to what commercial, industrial, public authority pay. A transportation utility would work very similarly, and I believe right now, if it's something we move forward with looking at, would be billed on the utility bill. The last bullet there, as we get into Scott's stuff, is really just that in order to keep it away from the Act 20 rule, and this is from 2013. In 2013, the Act 20 rule said that for some things that you create a fee-based system on, you have to offset your levy. So those are those two things as it pertains to the transportation utility. There's a lot more that fall outside of this, but snow plowing and street sweeping. So as long as the revenues are put toward eligible items for transportation, but not those, it doesn't affect the kind of Act 20 rule. Okay.
So just very briefly, what are some of the benefits? And really what we're talking about now as an alternative funding is the funding benefits. So it gives us a potential opportunity to work outside of the levy. So we're not imposed with those restrictions. And that can otherwise be done. The next 2 points really just kind of identify the two ways in which that could be utilized. One is just to fill the gap, go above and beyond. We otherwise know right now we're in a very steep inflationary period, and trying to keep up with that is very difficult. So our power to buy things is actually decreased. And so in order to make sure we can, keep up with things here, another revenue source that we could then make sure that we're making this sustainable. The other thing, which has its very limits, is the, just offsetting stuff. Do we have other places that we can't generate revenue for within the existing levy that maybe we could shift monies to and cover those, existing levy items with a utility? And that's a limited component of what it is, but it is an opportunity as well. Next slide, please.
Oops, too much.
So, and that takes me to this one as I table it. It's not all upside. And when we're talking about levy limits, there are some otherwise concerns that be done. Now, well, we otherwise don't necessarily have to offset our levy directly with what it is. It depends on how we're utilizing that. If we remove something out of our current transportation spending from the levy and put it into a fee-based structure, it will impact our general transportation aids. And as I put on the slide, you can see that actually, to get to that full level of what that offset would be, would take 6 years to go there. It's about 16.5% of what we otherwise spend. So you can always see, the bottom, just an example, if we were looking to say $500,000 is our starting point as far as need, and we can refine that. But I tend to think maybe somewhere in that, probably that, in this first year, what we'd see for 23 would be an offset of about $13,000, I'm sorry, dollars. And then, however, in 6 years would be about $82,000 in offset if we take something off of the levy. What I don't otherwise have included here, which is a little bit more of a gray area, if we were to actually remove, those things completely off the levy and not, take them off the levy and not move them to another department or something that, that would also then impact our expenditure restraint, which would be an additional 7%. I wouldn't anticipate that anyone's talking about, reducing our overall expenditures, but simply if that were to be utilized, you'd be shifting around so it wouldn't otherwise be impactful for us. Next slide. So a fee structure, and as Joel mentioned, this would be most similar to the stormwater utility. And within there, if you're familiar with how that otherwise works, it's really calculating the impervious surface that you others have. So it's kind of that potential to contribute to stormwater flooding situations. This is very similar, but instead of using that, what we otherwise do is kind of the industry standard here. The approach is to use the guidance book, which is put out by ITE, which is the Trip Generation Manual, which is currently in its 11th edition. And using that by different, categorically identifying each parcel, identifying how many trips does that parcel generate. And then the fee is essentially associated to the number of trips that parcel generates. In practice, it is very similar to it that we generate, identify what is a single family resident, use it, and then we create that equivalent residential transportation unit, which then would set the basis of fee for everybody else in the utility. Next slide. So we haven't really run the numbers. Like I said, we don't have all the answers yet as we're putting this together, but what could a fee otherwise be? And this is, again, you got to think very, very high level here, but just give an idea, kind of more so along the residential thought process here. We just recently sent out postcards for referenda questions, and there were approximately 9,000 address parcels. So just for the sake of argument here, we'll just assume that they're all equivalent at the moment. And then again, using that same $500,000, $500,000 thought process as a starting point, and we just divided that evenly amongst everybody. We're talking about $55, less than $5 a month would be that utility fee to get us to that $500,000 mark. Now, understanding once we put in the commercial, the non-residential properties that have, will generate more trips, to get to that same fee, that residential component would otherwise decrease. And then as the trip generation would otherwise identify more trips, those would go up, and that's where we get it. But starting with that, trying to identify what potentially the impact of this could be. Hopefully this gives everyone an idea of really where, we would, potentially be. It wouldn't be the idea to sock, everybody with a really high bill that they can't otherwise afford. This would be something along the lines of what we think would be, sustainable, help us as a city sustainable with another revenue source, while at the same time, not being too impactful to its residents. And so with that, kind of just again, very high level, just, hoping that, if there's more questions, we can otherwise answer that. Joel and I will definitely research whatever and present at another time with more information related to, more specifics about what those fees might otherwise be. We haven't had an opportunity to go through the chip generation, but we can definitely do that, as well as what an ordinance might otherwise look like to create such a utility.
Joel, anything you want to add? So generally speaking, we're looking to create a transportation utility. I would suggest, unless there's a strong objection, that we ask staff to continue on to get a little better idea and better understanding of what that would mean for individual homeowners as well as commercial properties. Because that's really going to be the biggest question that everybody has, right? What's it costing me?
Yeah.
There is some other opportunities, but we don't know what's going to happen with that. The state is, I think, in a good position to look at excluding the possibility of emergency services, taking that out of the levy, similar to what they currently do with the county. The county's emergency services are not restricted by the levy limits and expenditure restraint program as we are. So there are some other alternatives. In my opinion, the last ditch alternative is a spending referendum that will likely have to occur in April if we figure out that, boy, it's looking like we can't make ends meet for 2024. It would have to be April, and we'd have to have a crystal ball because there's no election in fall of 2024, so we can't have a referendum in fall of 2024. So we have to be proactive if we're going to do something like that and either have it in April of 2023. I'm sorry, did I say 24 earlier? April of 2023, because there's no fall of 2023 election, to prepare for our spending in 2024. April of 2024 is way too late because the budget will be approved already in November of 23. So I am hoping that it won't have to come to an operational spending referendum. I'm hoping that creatively we can figure out how to make some of these services still manageable. And as you know, our operational budget this year already took a 0% increase on everybody's operational budget, so we can try and meet the cost of living, half of the cost of living adjustment, maybe, which means effectively with inflation going up 7.5%, 8%, even more, our departments are effectively taking a loss equal to that amount because they still have goods and services that they have to buy. So this is one of those creative options. I would encourage us to consider it and move at least a little further down the line to see what it would mean to the taxpayers. If this is something that you absolutely don't want to do, by all means let us know now so we don't waste the time. But know that the alternative ultimately is an operational spending referendum, asking the taxpayers to raise their own taxes. Okay. Calder Keem, you got a question?
Yeah, I had a couple quick questions. Are there other municipalities in Wisconsin that currently use this? And then my second part of that is, and I suppose this could evolve or change, but is the idea that this utility fee would be added to the tax bill or added to the 3-month utility bill we already receive? So.
Yes, there are several other communities that have these, and even more that are looking into them. Wisconsin Rapids just implemented one, probably the closest to us.
We're all in the same spending storm.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of that. I know there are several other in the Milwaukee area, Pewaukee, I forget where exactly town of Buchanan is implemented, and several others, I forget exactly where, but there's I think somewhere around a dozen of them or so, as I recall, last known. As far as the billing, that's something, I know I've been talking about Director Lemke here, that I think we could probably work out something that would be added to the utility bills that are going there is probably the easiest way to facilitate the billing component of this.
Thank you.
Especially because of the frequency of it. You know, the alternative would be some way to put it on the tax bill, and then there'd be a lot of in-between stuff going on, and the frequency being quarterly or more is probably a better approach. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other initial questions? Yes.
I'm not so sure it's a
How
question.
sexy is it now?
Yeah, very. No matter how you look at it, people on a fixed income are going to suffer, whether it's in our property taxes or a separate fee. I'm not opposed to this. I mean, we got to find other ways. If it's a way to maybe make something else a little lower on the other side, would help people like me, retired and not keeping up with the cost of living either with what I've got coming in.
Well,
But
Social Security had an increase that was greater than the projected cost of living adjustment, didn't they?
yeah, but it's probably not going to keep up next time. And
Oh, I see.
who knows if we're going to have it next year or not. Anyway, I mean, it's like we've got a fee here, and then we get a fee here, and then we have our taxes here. It's all going to cost me more money, but I think this is definitely worth looking at. So I'm not opposed to it. I just,
It's another option, right, to consider. So we'll bring you more information if that's the way it's going and possible structure. To Scott's point about the potential fee, just for a little bit of behind the curtain type stuff, I think that you're looking at a household trip generation of what, maybe 9-ish, was it?
Yes.
And then you get up into some properties that have really high traffic, whether it's fast food, convenience stores that are in the hundreds. So when you look at that proportion, you can see that would drive that number down pretty hard. And so that was really probably worst case scenario, or definitely worst case scenario for that number as it would apply to a single family resident, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? If you have questions as they come up, feel free to contact the Public Works Director or the Utility Director, and they can answer the questions for you as they come up. This will be a process, so. Mark, if you want, you can go ahead and, or either that or you can ask Joel offline or Scott offline.
I just wanted to comment. I really liked the idea when I was on City Council up north. We did the storm sewer in 2003, I think. And the nice part about it, and Mary, I understand your concern. The one nice thing about a utility like this, it spreads it over the broadest spectrum of users possible. I agree with Joel. This was kind of the worst case scenario that was put out there because that didn't include commercial properties. It also didn't include the one, and up north it was hard for me because I was on city council. I also was a school administrator. I was a principal at the time. Schools ended up also getting assessed, so did nonprofits, and so it spreads the burden as broadly as possible and minimizes the impact and has a much less of an individual impact than if you had to go and put it on a referendum to exceed the revenue limits. So I think this is definitely worth pursuing.
Okay. Then we'll have staff work on it and bring it back for further consideration in the future. Let's see, item number 3 is to approve the ordinance amendments as it relates to Chapter 9.05, as that relates to parking. You know, we should probably just have a standing item. More parking changes and corrections.
right.
There's plenty of them.
Director, do you want to add anything here?
Really, this is just all related to the new parking lot, the replacement parking lot, FD. When we did that, to maximize the parking lot, we were moving the accessible parking to the street, which is something that we are otherwise allowed to do to provide that. So it's just the changes to make sure that accessible parking out on the street is done right. And of course, in the process, the mayor pointed out, we found a few other things in that area. So it kind of packages it all up. That's why there are several of them here.
I will make a motion to approve the ordinance amendment.
Thank you.
As it relates to parking.
I'll second.
Second by Morrow. Discussion. Comments from the audience? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 4 is an occupancy license for 1101 First Street regarding the existing encroachment onto the First Street right-of-way. When the then Greyhound station was built, that whole area was rebuilt and redone. The First Street, the center point, all that stuff was redone. The building was inadvertently built within some of the city right-of-way. The Greyhound station is long gone, but that has continued on. So this is just fixing it by giving them an easement into that right-of-way. Anything to add, Director?
I do. Those with a keen eye notice that I inadvertently left out Exhibit B as part of the document itself. Technically, if you look at the survey that's on Exhibit A, that is technically supposed to be Exhibit B. And then the legal description is on the upper portion of this, and that will be pulled out and made into a separate exhibit before it comes to your final consideration at City Council next week. So I do apologize for that mistake, but otherwise, City staff would recommend approval as presented.
Tomorrow, so moved.
Thank you. Second? Second by Kneebone. Discussion there.
I await Exhibit B.
Noted. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved, and we are adjourned at 7:52.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.